I'm going to walk you through what foods you want to buy and eat for fat loss. And I'm also going to show you how to put these foods together to create high protein, low calorie meals to help you drop body fat. Nutrition has to be one of the biggest struggles people have when it comes to fat loss. So let's make it real simple. Now, before we start, there's something that we need to understand. How does fat loss occur? Fat loss occurs by creating a calorie deficit, which is simply taking in less calories than you are expending. So if you're expending or burning more calories than you're taking in, you will drop body fat over time. So as you've grasped from that means there's two sides to the equation: calories in and calories out. Now in this video, we're obviously going to be talking about calories in. However, just last week I did do a video talking about the calorie outside of the equation. So how best to burn calories when it comes to dropping body fat. So if you want to check that out, I'll drop that in the description. But let's crack on with today's video talking about food intake. Now, before we get into exactly what foods I would buy and eat for fat loss, I want you to understand this simple concept: calorie to protein ratio. All that means is we want to find a good calorie to protein ratio every time we have a meal or if we look for snacks. To work this out, it's pretty simple. Once you've made your meal or looked at your snack, you're going to look at the total amount of calories within that meal. So let's say, for example, it's 700 calories. You're then also going to look at the total amount of protein in that meal or snack. Let's say, for example, it's 30 grams of protein. Now for this ratio, you're going to add a 0 at the end of that protein number. So rather than 30, it becomes 300. That's just going to allow us to compare the calories to protein number a lot easier. So now we've got 700 calories and we've got 30 grams of protein. Our job when it comes to making meals or picking snacks is to try and get the calories to protein as close as possible. And if you do that every time you create a meal, or 80-90% of the time you create a meal or look for a potential snack, you are going to be doing a lot of good things nutritionally when it comes to dropping body fat and sustaining that. So in that same example, if we could get the calories down to closer 550 and we could get that protein up closer to 350 or 40, all of a sudden we're comparing 550 to about 350 or 400. Those numbers are so much closer. When we look at food and creating a meal, the first thing we always want to start with is our protein intake. And to keep this simple, I would break protein into two categories. You've got your lean proteins and you've got your fatty proteins. Your lean proteins don't contain as much fat and therefore contain less calories. Your fatty proteins contain more fat and therefore contain more calories. For the most part, I would pick lean proteins over fatty proteins to help you keep protein high but keep calories a little bit lower. However, today we're going to use salmon, which is a fatty protein source, but we're going to use it today because I want to show you how you can manage your meal elsewhere to help bring calories down. Plus, you don't want to avoid fats like these completely because they are also good for you. So we're going to use both of these salmon fillets. Now, these salmon fillets alone are going to come just under 500 calories, which is a lot. But I'm going to show you how we can keep calories lower elsewhere within the meal. However, both of these salmon fillets are also going to bring us about 50 grams of protein, which means our protein is going to be pretty high straight from the get-go. Now, because our calories from the salmon are already pretty high, we've got to reduce calories elsewhere. How are we going to do that? Next, we're going to look at our carbohydrate source. So different carbohydrates are going to obviously contain different amount of calories. And a good habit you want to get into is trying to find sources of food that contain less calories, but for a good amount of volume. So what that means is volume is the amount of space a food takes up on your plate, for example. So if you were to compare 50 grams of potato with 50 grams of pasta as an example, the calories for the potato are going to be lower, but for the amount of space they take, the amount of volume, they might be the same, or potato might be higher. Which means not only are you consuming less calories, but it's still going to do a good job of filling you up as much as that alternative. So if you can find good low calorie, higher volume alternatives for other foods you might eat, then it's going to help you massively keep calories lower, but also manage your hunger, which is very important for sustaining the calorie deficit that you create. Next, we then have our vegetables. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a lot of vegetables with my meals. Why? 1, they're low calorie, and 2, they're high in volume. So for the exact reasons I just shared before, having a lot of veg is going to help keep calories lower and keep you feeling full. So I'm going to have peas and I'm also going to have carrots, but I'm going to do two things with the carrots. One, I'm going to chop them up and put them in with the peas. And two, I'm going to create almost carrot fries to go with my wedges. I'd always aim to get about 1 to 2 handfuls of veg in every meal. Another good idea is to have a lot of variety with your veg, just from a health standpoint, but I'm pretty limited right now, so I'm just going to stick to a lot of carrots and a decent amount of peas. Next, let's talk about fats. So fats are the most calorie dense macronutrient. There's 9 calories per gram of fat, 4 calories per gram of protein and carbs. So you want to be very careful with your fat portions. Have a little bit too much and it's very easy for your calories to rack up, which is why I'm using these 1 calorie sprays rather than using teaspoons of olive oil, because it's just easier for me to control the calories. And again, it's not saying that fats are bad, they're just calorie dense. And while we're trying to keep calories controlled, it's just something to take into consideration. You do want to include good quality fats within your diet, you just have to be wary about how much of them you're having in terms of calories. Obviously, we're going to add a little bit of seasoning to all these. So this meal right now is going to be looking at roughly about 650 to 700 calories. But the protein is going to be just over 50. Okay, so all of a sudden those comparisons, you're probably looking at about 700 to about 550 or 750 to about 550. Those numbers are relatively close. So that is a pretty good meal in terms of keeping calories lower while keeping protein high. Now I did use a fatty protein option here. So if you're using a leaner protein option, you can probably get those calories down a bit more if you wanted. Or you could keep the calories the same, but obviously you could play around with your carb options and maybe have a slightly calorie dense or more calorie dense carb option. But what I want this video to do is to give you an idea of things to think about to try and get this ratio as close together as possible. Because like I said, if you do that, you will be doing a lot of good things to try to keep calories low, protein high, and helping you with your fat loss. When you come into buying or picking foods, protein, lean proteins, priority. Don't ignore fatty proteins, but I'd have more lean proteins than fatty proteins. Lean proteins, chicken, turkey, white fish, Greek yogurt, natural yogurt. You can get high protein yogurt. Red meat is typically fatty, but you can get lean cuts. So you can get like 5% beef mince or reduced fat beef burgers. Oily fish or your fatty fishes. Pork is typically fatty. Now, if you want more options when it comes to protein, I have a protein cheat sheet which walks you through a lot of different protein options, how to get that protein into your diet. So if you want that, do go down to the description. I'll put it in there so you can grab it for free. When it comes to carbohydrates, again, for the majority of your carbohydrates, you're going to want foods that are high in volume and typically lower in calories. Again, this doesn't mean you can't have foods that are, or carb sources that are higher in calories and lower in volume. So potato is a good shout. Rice is a decent shout. Depends on the different types of rice, different types of pasta, different types of potato. They're going to change. So do look at nutritional labels, okay? Looking at nutritional labels makes this just really easy. You can compare different types of the same food or different brands. Potato, rice, pasta then becomes a bit more calorie dense, but you can get stuff like lentil pasta, for example, which is not only great for high volume. The calories are pretty much the same, just a little bit lower, but what this is also great for is it can help boost your protein. Some foods like this are going to be decent for protein for what they are. So for example, if you have about 100 grams of this, I think it's about 10-12 grams of protein. So it's actually pretty decent to help bump your protein up. And then when it comes to fats, all fats are going to be calorie dense. So what I would do is just focus on your portion sizes of fats. Keep your portion sizes of fats really small, really controlled. Don't eliminate them because you do need good fats in your diet. So I would really be picky about the fats that you're having. Look at monounsaturated, polyunsaturated fats. You can just quickly Google them. But again, fatty fish, some nuts, dark chocolate for monounsaturated eggs. And just remember again, if you do have a meal or a snack that is going to be higher in fats because you want to, you can bring calories down elsewhere, like in this meal, to still try and keep those calories in moderation. And last but not least, don't forget about still having some flexibility within your diet, okay? You don't want to completely eliminate foods that maybe don't fall into these categories. Flexibility is important, but again, you do have to keep it in moderation. Think like 80-20%. 80% of your food's coming from the foods we've sort of spoken about, whole, fresh foods, nutritious foods, and then that 20-10% coming from less nutritious foods, just for flexibility. And a quick note too, in this day and age, foods that are typically higher calorie and less nutritious. We have so many different alternatives. Brands have created alternatives that keep those calories lower. So do shop around, do have a look, because you can find some of your favorite foods for a lot less calories now. If you did find this video helpful, please do drop a like because it helps me. If you haven't already, do subscribe. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, so it would mean a lot. And I post videos that help you with your fat loss and fitness almost every day, long form and short form. And again, if you want to check out that video about how best to burn calories, I'll put it in the description. And if you want to grab my free protein cheat sheet, I'll also put that in the description. All right, take care. I'll see you on the next one.